Bruce released his High Hopes album. Now, revisit this archival conversation with Bruce. High Hopes 10th anniversary with the E Street Radio staff and Bruce Springsteen on Sirius XM.
Welcome, Bruce Springsteen.
Thank you.
To E Street Radio. You're home away from home.
It is. Great to be here. Who do we have?
Oh, I'm sorry. Jim Rotolo over
Jim
there.
Rotolo, of course.
We've met before.
Yes.
Caroline McGarrett's.
Hello.
You met me.
Yes.
Dave Marsh. Vinny Usurielli. Yeah.
Is this
I bit it
the
off.
Wild and the Innocent fan? Or is I'm thinking of someone else?
Well, we all are. But I think Caroline was in there beating the drum. Yeah, you and I had a conversation about that.
Mm-hmm.
So, ready to start?
Yes.
Good. So you've done all this stuff for the last couple of years, a lot of touring in a lot of places, some of them old, some of them more new than any time in a long time. Springsteen and I, and now we've got a new record coming. Does all this fit together for you?
Well, I guess first thing was obviously the tour. You know, the tour was a big event for the band, and I don't know, it was some way watermark for us. But I think a new place the band got to, and I think it being a first tour after Clarence passed away and not having Dan there, you know, it was really transformative for the E Street Band, for me too. And then just the response from our audience was just, I didn't quite know how to describe it. It was incredible. I'd have to think deeply about other moments that were as meaningful for us as, or as much fun for us as musicians, and you know, it was way up there. Just ran into incredible crowds every place we went, and it was just so much, and then so much more than that. On any given night, you could come out and find yourself in the middle of some sort of epic crowd and performance that you hadn't expected, and the band just coming to life in a way that was just tremendously enjoyable and fulfilling for us. So the tour was, first thing I have to do is I have to thank all the fans, everybody all around the world that came out and saw us. You know, that was it was a very critical moment for the band, and it was just very exciting, and I can't thank everybody enough. So that was just a great year and a half of work, and the Wrecking Ball record, which I felt was one of my very best. It was just great playing, you know, bringing that stuff to our live audience. So music, I'm always working on music, so that's quite a while back. I said, yeah, I didn't want a long time to go in between releases as much as we used to have, you know, and so it takes a little bit of extra. I carry a lot of music with me that I work on as I go. But anyway, I forget the other things you mentioned at this point. But
I think that's the big ones, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, Jim and I were talking about how you were able to go from being, what do we say, like the detail-oriented, single-focus guy of,
getting
you know,
control
say the
of
Darkness movie.
Yeah.
to this, and what we were wondering was, is this about your collaborators?
If you don't, well, part of it is if you don't do that, if you don't figure out how to do it a different way, you don't have a life. You know, if you go back to see the Darkness film or the Wonder Woman, no one had any lives, and the few poor folks that did have a life, I was intent on taking that away from them, you know. And I can remember when John Landau first came up to me and said, I have to leave now because I have to go give the baby a bath, you know. We were like shocked, like no one has ever left, you know, in the middle of a 24-hour session or something, you know. And it was like, oh, I get it. Yeah, there's this man has another life, you know, besides the one I so slavishly impose upon him, you know. So that was, I mean, we were still very young, in the late 20s, and that worked very well then, and we didn't know how to do it any other way. I've said many times, and the focus was, I was used to that kind of relentless focus, and I still have the same kind of focus, but I just, you know, it's a little more laser-like in the sense that I'll aim at it for a particular period of time at a particular thing, and then I have learned the skill of putting that away for a while and moving on to other things, you know, that demand your time and attention if you want them in your life. So a lot of the activity we've had over the past particularly the past decade, came from a result of actually sort of learning how to sort of put some boundaries on how you work, where you work, when you work, how long you work, and also learning how to do. I mean, I could fret for several hours over just a few notes at the end of a song, you know. It wasn't really necessary, or maybe it was necessary at the time, but looking back on it, it was part of the obsessive compulsive thing that most people in my line of work or something else similarly creative have as a part of their personality, you know. Sometimes it's great, other times it can ruin things. And you know, we are overthinkers are us, you know. That was our specialty, certainly back in the day. These days it's a little more tempered, you know. I like to think it's not any less focused, but it's a little more tempered as to how and when we put those things together. So a lot of the productivity has resulted from, we went from making a record in 2 years in Darkness to making one generally with Brendan O'Brien. Our records were a month long. You know, that was how long they took. I think The Rising was that long. Magic, I think. These were all records that are primarily recorded in 3 weeks and mixed in a week or two. And that was just the way that Brendan worked, and the way that we all worked. And we went in with the material. We didn't record something that, you know, something had to be very, very close to, yeah, we're going to use this, you know, which is how I ended up with this group of material on this record. These were things we didn't cut in mass anymore and end up with 40 songs or 30 songs. You know, we cut 15. And when I'd audition them for Brendan generally, and he would say, okay, that's got a real shot at making it, you know. So over that past decade, there was a small handful of things that were that close to being on the records that didn't get on. And those are the things that, a lot of the things I worked on for this particular album, you know. I went back to the old school a little bit. The record before the Wrecking Ball, which has not been released, I wrote a lot of songs, you know, and but I had kind of have time on my hands, and I had a home studio that Patty built, which did a great job, and so I had some time in there, and once again, I was a little bit the old way of searching for an album, you know, but Wrecking Ball, once again, was very focused. I think, I'm trying to think if did we have any outtakes? I don't know. We might.
Did you write that real quick?
You know, yeah, it's kind of, you know, there were a lot of things that were new and came kind of quick, but say like Wrecking Ball I'd had in my notebook for a year and a half, the song itself, which I kind of wrote right when the crash happened, and didn't have an album for it. So I had that in the notebook. I had Shackled and Drawn. I had Rocky Ground for a film project someone had asked me to do that was somewhat faith-based. And so I was writing kind of gospel music, and they kind of crossed over those two songs. So those were also in a book that I had. And then, you know, Easy Money was brand new. Wrecking Ball I'd written for, you know, our last gig at Meadowlands. Land of Hope and Dreams we'd been playing for quite a while. So the funny thing is, the idea of it kind of came very suddenly, and in about 10 days I put all those things together and then wrote some other things, and they became Wrecking Ball album. But a lot of this stuff is I kind of collect as I go, and I have a lot of resources I return to. You know, it's kind of rare that I sit down and kind of write 10 things and go in and immediately and go in. You know, it's I've kind of a library of sources and that I go to shape into an album at this point.
High Hopes 10th anniversary with the E Street Radio staff and Bruce Springsteen on Sirius XM.
You talked about going back with the E Street Band, this time starting at the Apollo Theater without Clarence and Danny, and you guys did the whole tour, and then went down to Australia and introduced another member of the band. Can you talk a little bit about how it was bringing Tom in for the Australian and how that led to this new album?
That was a result of, you know, Steve couldn't make those gigs. I think those were the first gigs he couldn't make since we all started to play together again. And so we said, okay, well, Tom was he'd played with us a few times, and he said he was up for it, which we're lucky to have him. And then he came down. He was just great. You know, he really, because Tom came to the show for many years. I was saying he came to the shows, and I see him backstage, and I think the two of us were kind of, you could see little clouds over our heads going, how would we make this work? How would we make what he does work a little bit with what we do? And how would I stretch what I do to work with what he does, you know. One, you know, we figured it out one night at the sports arena in Los Angeles. He came to sound check, and I had a version of Ghost of Tom Joad, which was ironic because Ghost of Tom Joad began as a rock song for the greatest hits record we put out in '95, I think. So it began as a new song I was trying to write for the band, for that record. I couldn't figure out a rock arrangement, so I found an acoustic arrangement, which then I wrote the rest of the Ghost of Tom Joad around that sort of sound. Then, you know, when I got the band back together, we kind of found an arrangement for it. So it ended up where it began again, but he really brought it to another level, you know, and which is why I wanted it on. Some things need to be sort of formally defined, which is why American Skin and Goes to Tom Joad are on this particular collection of songs, because those two, I felt, well, these are two of my great songs, and these are two of the greatest versions of those things. And so I feel if it doesn't get formally presented in a record, they lose a little of their authority. You know, they become, oh, they came out on a live record. It always sounds like, well, yeah, no, that only came out in a live, you know. So maybe it's but I said, well, these need to be, and then we just came up with really good recordings of them, you know, which is the other thing. You had to bring it home in the studio, which is hard to do after you play something live for a long time. Very, very hard to top any E Street Band live recordings of any of those songs. We struggled really with Land of Hope and Dreams. Ron, a producer, and I, we spent that took a good deal of the time we spent just trying to make it fresh enough to where it made sense to be on the record, change it rhythmically a little bit, but also to keep what the band brought to it, which is the enormous intensity and the power. So, you know, those things are, we always go, okay, we play the live, we go in and we slowly start to work on it until it comes up. Okay, that works, you know. And Tom had a lot to do with both of those things, sort of attaining the level they reached on this particular record. You know, he just kind of kicked it up another notch or two, so.
That's one of the most epic guitar solos we've ever heard live, and to hear it on the album was
so
pretty
great,
fantastic.
You know? Yeah.
So there's the project, there's the new record. It starts in Australia with what we've seen and what we've heard recently is that Tom Morello was listening to E Street Radio and heard you do a version of High Hopes, and that's how this whole thing started. So that's where it all began, right at that particular point with that song?
No, I kind of had, you know, I have groups of material that I carry around sometimes, and I'm always when I have some free time, I'm always like, I wonder what those guys are doing, and I'll go over and I'll visit a group of songs that maybe sometimes I got one that I keep going back to is 20 years old, you know, and there's a record we recorded, mixed, and didn't put out, you know. Bob Clearmountain mixed it, recorded it, and spent a lot of time on it, didn't put it out, you know. That was like '94. And it still intrigues me. I still go back to it. There's still things on it I really like. And I may go back to sort of say, okay, well, why, you know. Sometimes it's timing. Timing just doesn't feel right for that kind of record. I'm a little bit in tune to the rhythm of the conversation I'm having with my audience. It has a certain rhythm to it. In other words, you know, there's sort of, you know, there's just each record brings in a certain... you know, you may want to Ghost of Tom Joad or something that's truly solo. You know, you'll do one of those, and that may move me to something very different, or like a rhythm of the past couple of years where we had great group records, rock records, and then I had a solo record with Devils and Dust, and then I had the Secret Sessions, and then it kind of moved me back towards the best. So there's a rhythm of conversation that I pay a little bit of attention to. You know, like if that feels like. I try to hear a little bit with my audience's ears and see if it's susceptible. So this particular thing was something where we thought we might play a little bit more this year. I had this group material half kind of very, very incomplete. And then Tom's entrance kind of was the glue that turned it into, you know, something we'd release. You know, he came in and his idea was High Hopes, and we said, it sounded pretty good. So we recorded a little down in Australia. And the stuff sounded good, and I said, okay, well, if I have these couple of things, and then I have this other group of material that I've been playing with, and then Tom played on some of that, and it started to really kind of come to life and feel like, yeah, okay, this is something I think the audience. It's not a lot of new songs. It's sort of stuff I've gathered over the past decade or so that were a hair's breadth from, like I say, from the records we made, you know. But it turned into something that felt like it's a complete piece of music, and I thought, yeah, this would be stuff that fans would like to have. So.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned songs that almost made albums, but like you just said at the last second, you decided to nix them.
Yeah.
Harry's Place.
Right.
I heard that you nixed it from The Rising. Is that what happened?
Which is kind of, I mean, Independence Day was nixed from a record. Sherry Darling was thrown off. Those two were thrown off of Darkness on the Edge of Town.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Born in the USA was thrown off Nebraska. You know, so you know that's kind of gives you an idea, sort of the parameters that songs can make it or not make it at any given moment. You know, Harry's Place. I guess I seem to remember talking to Ted Koppel about it in my notebook, and that was a lyric I quote. So that would have been in an interview upon the release of The Rising, I think. You know, so
Yes.
I must have had that lyric. You know, and then I know that we tried to record it with the band before we recorded The Rising. As a matter of fact, there's some sessions of the band going in for an evening and roughing out some songs, and that and The Wall was another one. And then Harry's Place almost got on Magic because it sort of morphed into being something I thought was about the Bush years, which Magic had a lot of references to. And once again, it just was, you know, it just didn't, you know, it was the last thing we were considering, and at the last moment we thought the record was better with, I don't know, I forget how many songs were on it, 12 rather than 13, and it slipped off. And then Tom played on it, and we remixed it, and so it's shown up, you know. But yeah, things they're from all over. Down in the Hole also, that was from The Rising. Those are things that I kind of had sitting there going, I'd like to get that out, you know.
In 2014, Bruce released his High Hopes album. Now, revisit this archival conversation with Bruce. High Hopes 10th anniversary with the E Street Radio staff and Bruce Springsteen on Sirius XM.
One of the things I found interesting, if we can just go back to Harry's Place, is bringing Tom Morello into that song and also having, which I'm assuming is Clarence's saxophone on that. What I found interesting about it is, I don't know if you intended it to do it this way or not, but it's kind of like you're combining the old kind of with the new, the history with the new blood that comes with the band.
Kind of what worked, you know. I mean, you know, Tom brought a certain currency to the material, you know, and that ended up being really important because it just made the stuff feel very present and very fresh, you know, and so there is that overlap on a lot of it. Like I said, a lot of the music was reworked. It's kind of through him in a certain way. Certainly the things that he's very prominent on, and it just brought everything up into your face in a nice way.
Mm. Did Tom just know what to do, or was there a lot of coaching?
No, I don't. Once in a while, I may suggest something. You know, I need you to chainsaw this, or I need you to, you know, or you know, and I'll have sort of an emotional cue that I may give him, but very often he has so many ideas that I'll send him a tape sometimes, and it'll come back with, you know, 5 or 6 things that go from something that's sort of conventional to something that's very, very, very out, you know, and I'll get to go through it and play with it a little bit, you know.
Another song on here that I really love, and I can't wait to see it live, is Heaven's Wall. It just seems like a big,
that
fun
should
live
be good
song.
live, you know. That's one of the ones we'll probably work on when we get back together for the show.
What I was wondering is, there's seems to be like a call and response guitar battling going on this song.
That's between Tom and himself, yeah. You know, it's like, so we put it on each different sides of the speakers, but you know, he plays great on that.
Yeah.
Just great.
We were wondering about it. We were talking in the office about it. We were trying to figure out if it was you or if it was Nils and Tom. We couldn't figure it out. So
Yeah, I got to think Nils is going to be holding down half of that when we go to play, you know. But it's a nice spot, yeah.
And that doesn't even get to the gospel part of that, which to me is,
Yeah.
that's my heart.
Yeah, that was it was a funny song. I wrote it. To me, it felt like a '70s rock song or something. I think I'm trying to think of, it might have been something we played with for Magic, and when I went back to it, I said, "Well, this is if I bring this home, this will be great when we play," you know.
Yeah.
So
with the addition of Tom Morello being part of the album and of course doing stuff on stage with him over the years, he's a heavy rock guitar player. Do you listen to much hard rock?
I don't now, but like I was saying, I started my career as a heavy metal guitarist. You know, I played.
Yeah, we were listening to
I had
Steve the other day.
Like I said, I had a prog rock band basically, and we were a heavy blues, prog rock group, Steel Mill. If you go back, and it's funny because somebody was just talking to me about the stuff, and I said, "Yeah, there's stuff on the internet." And so I went on YouTube and I found quite a bit of stuff from back in the day.
Going back to Georgia.
Yeah, and there was something, Wind and the Rain, and I started listening to it, and I said, "Wow, that was pretty good," you know. And the recordings were not great, but not bad either, you know.
Coming to a sign near you very soon.
You know, and so Steve and I both were pretty familiar with that kind of guitar, like literally made a living at it for quite a while, and I actually miss it. I realized I do miss it, and I realized, oh yeah, this isn't something that really found much of its way into my music once kind of the E Street Band came along. You know, I mean, Tom's thing was he took it all out to some other place. He's one of the few guitarists of the past decade or 20 years that really is kind of like Nils and Edge and Eddie Van Halen, these guys they have a world at their fingertips that they can tap into, and just creates an entire moment in time, you know. So yeah.
I feel Tom brings that element back into the band.
Yeah, it's like I said, oh yeah, you know, maybe a trio next. I can't tell.
We were talking about how the Ghost of Tom Joad, that you and Tom chose to record this as a duet this time. Did that come naturally to you, or was it something that you just spoke about?
No, it was just something that we did when he came to sing that night at the show. It was like, I think he said he might have been playing it in his own show or something.
Yes.
I think, you know.
Rage, I think.
So I said, well, maybe you should sing half the verses. You know, it's just be more fun. And so it became a natural duet. You know, and we haven't found another one yet, but we'll dig something. We'll dig something up. But he's got a nice deep baritone. You know, a little not quite as low as Leonard Cohen, but he's a baritone. He's not a tenor. He's a baritone, which is an interesting range for a rock musician.
I want to ask you about This Is Your Sword, because it has something in it at the end. I mean, first of all, probably I should just thank you for it, because
Really?
it's going to be a sanity device.
I almost left that one off too.
Why?
That was
Became my favorite song on that.
that's in the no surrender slot. You know, that's sort of like you maybe should ask Steve. You know, and
Well,
Steve got no surrender on Born in the USA, but it was just one of those, it was just something I had, and I don't know.
but you answered the question.
That's right.
What's in the Born to Run slot?
Maybe that's it. You know,
Because love is real.
Yeah.
That was what knocked me out, was that ending.
Yeah, no. It was one of those, like, well, you know, maybe this is too direct. it always scares me. So, but once again, the record is a funny thing. You know, all our records end up being they're blueprints, and so I'll put something like, well, I don't know where that may go someplace interesting when we start to play it live. Like Dream Baby Dream on this record is like that. You know, I never felt I quite got it in the studio, but I got close enough to where I said at the end of the tour, I said, well, we need something I want to make a video thanks to fans. And I said, well, you know, we've got that version of Dream Baby Dream that's just kind of, you know, I listened to a lot and was always a real hallmark of the Devils and Dust tour. So I'd love to get that out somewhere. And it worked so well with the video, you know. Then after people seem to like it, so I said, well, maybe we should throw it on the end of the record, you know. And it's going to turn into something when we play. I'm not sure what yet, but it's interesting that'll be something that'll go somewhere when the band gets together. So some songs sort of come on. I approached them a little bit like that, but that song was just, to me, it was kind of in that slot of it's very heart in the sleeve sort of thing.
I really love Patty's voice on This Is Your Sword as well. That harmony, wherever you go, that is my favorite part of that song. It's just...
Well, what I do sometimes is I leave Patty in the studio, and she's actually a very good producer. She, rather than stand around and coach, I'll leave her there for a few hours with Ron, and when I come back, there's always something interesting on tape, you know, something that if I'd have been there, I might have squelched, you know. I get so too nervous and impatient, and so she sort of comes up with a lot of those kinds of harmonies and things on her own. I'm trying to think. There's something on the Last Carnival on Magic at the end, and also there was something on Wrecking Ball that she sang fabulous on, and she just sort of she was on This Depression, and she's just very, very creative with the vocal parts, and so and sometimes it recognizes her, sometimes it gets treated, or she treats it in a way that turns it into something else, you know. But yeah, she sounds great.
High Hopes 10th anniversary with the E Street Radio staff and Bruce Springsteen on Sirius XM.
I wanted to ask about the song Hunter of Invisible Game. I really love this song, and the concept of this guy surrounded by destruction who just doesn't give up hope and keeps looking for something even though it might not be there.
Yeah. I'm trying to think when I wrote it, you know, it's a bit post-apocalyptic, I guess. And that was once again, we talk about Tommy, but that was a big favorite of his. You know, there was something in it. And he mentioned it for years. He happened to hear it in the studio quite a while back, a couple of years ago, and said, hey, man, what'd you do with that song? I said, well, it's around. And I like that song a lot. It was one of those things where, like, is it complete? Is it, you know, I was fishing for some lines towards the end, but there's something about the descriptiveness of the early verses, and then the tagline, you know, is just, it's interesting. And it's got a sweet swing to it, and it's kind of musically lovely. So I'm trying to think what I was working on at the time. But that's sort of always our story.
Well, do you keep things sometimes because they're mysterious even to you?
Well, if you can explain it before you write it, you wouldn't write it. All of this kind of discussing of these things generally come through discussing them. You know, a lot of the things, I'm not thinking about the themes of things very much when I'm in the process of putting it together, you know. Most of the talking I've done about probably all my music over the years has been because people ask me questions about it. You know, of course, what does this mean? What were you thinking when you wrote that? You know, and that, I guess, is a result of sort of the intellectualization of rock, which occurred partly thanks to this man here and the guy in the other room. I'm not sure where he is.
Yeah, you know, Chris is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame now, so it's over.
But when people started to really write about it in a way, which was very important at the time, this was probably, we're going back to the mid-'60s now. I was on a street corner in Greenwich Village. I was taking the bus up there because you could not live in my hometown at the time. If you looked, you know.
Now you got to tell them.
If you looked unusual. Are you from Freehold?
I'm also from Freehold.
You're kidding me.
St. Rose of Lima.
No.
Yes.
I'm in shock here, boys. Really?
Yes.
We have established a great bond right now. We have a deep bond going right now.
The nuns still talk about you.
Really?
They do.
Well, you know, over the years, we had a detente, and I would go back to the convent, and they would invite me in. I'd ride my motorcycle down to the nuns' convent, and they would invite me in and put on the baseball game on an afternoon and give me a beer. They had beer in the icebox, you know. And it was always very peaceful. It was quiet. So I don't know who's still there, but it was. That's pretty amazing. From Freehold. In town or township?
No,
or?
right on the border of Freehold and Howell, right off Route 9.
Yeah, wow, that's my stomping grounds. That's incredible.
Yeah.
You know, but I was on a street corner in Greenwich Village. There was a sheet of paper that said "Crawdaddy" on top. You know, and I picked it up and I was shocked because there were people who were sort of, at the time, writing about music the way that I was thinking about it. And I didn't think anybody else was thinking about it like that, you know. And I can remember going up and getting those sheets every, I don't know if they came out bi-weekly or weekly at the time. I don't remember.
I think
John
Paul
probably
could get
remember.
enough copy in.
But it was where I first saw the name John Landau. Was under a review of maybe the Blues Project or something. But yeah, I think that a lot of the things, you know, I'm writing, I'm moving towards, I find I'm usually trying to resolve something that's bothering me internally. That's really the thrust. The thrust isn't a theme or it's not conceptual. It's something is continuing to bother me even after all these years. And I am going through my meditation that helps me move towards a slightly greater degree of resolution if I come up with something that I'm able to express some of what I'm feeling and then talk to people about it. So that's really the thrust for songwriting. It's very similar to eating, you know, in that there's some part of you, also there's a part of you that gets very uncomfortable, very important for songwriters. I'm sure most artists, creative people, there has to be a part of you that is continuously uncomfortable with yourself. So you have to be tolerant of that part of your makeup. And you have to both not let it drive you crazy, which it has a tendency to want to do. And you also don't want to dismiss it or try to banish it or deny it because it's where all the fuel for what you're going to do is, you know. So I'm usually in a discussion with that part of myself where I'm very uncomfortable with myself and I'm searching for some. So I always say, I've said in other interviews, is that we're repairmen. Everybody's broken. Everybody's broken somewhere. You can't get through life without it. And you've paid your artists and your filmmakers and your poets and your novelists to be, basically, they're your handymen, they're your repairmen. And we're willing to go into the garage where all this junk is lying around and we start to tinker away, you know, and we try to come up with something that assists you in, when you contextualize and make small sense of those things, they just start to repair those little pieces of you. You're never finished, you know, but that's the real mechanism of writing. And so it starts out quite non-intellectual and non-verbal. It's just feeling, you know, and it usually comes from a feeling of discomfort. And then suddenly a metaphor for that discomfort hits you. Wrecking Ball works for me, works for Miley Cyrus too. You know, it's like, so once you grab that, you can just go to town with it wherever you want to go with it, you know? And all right after, they're in search of metaphor, high hopes, her invisible game. And once you catch that metaphor, then you try to flesh it out. But it's a metaphor for your discomfort in some way, for your both emotional and intellectual searching and dissatisfaction. To me, that's the engine that drives all of your writing, drives when you go out on stage at night. You know, why would a grown man of my age want to go out and drench himself and exhaust himself at this late date? All right, there's only one reason, because he has to. All right. so that's sort of, you know, that's the point. That's the way all that works, you know. And it's that thing that drove me while I was in Freehold and out of Freehold, you know. And I spent many of nights driving around Freehold, contemplating all those questions. You know?
High Hopes 10th anniversary with the E Street Radio staff and Bruce Springsteen on Sirius XM.
Go ahead, kids. Who's got one?
Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to talk about the way that you find certain songs to play live for a certain audience. And I'm going back to during the Wrecking Ball tour, there was When I Leave Berlin, Get Out of Denver, and then there's those songs that you did.
Yes, those are called gimmicks, all right? They are called gimmicks. And when I get into a town, I try to find something with the name of that town, because when you say it, the audience will cheer loudly.
But then I'm going down to South America, where you came out with these 3 songs where you're singing in Spanish and
very
Portugal.
difficult gimmick to perform, but you know, part of it is, one, you have to have a good song, you know. And I somehow I stumbled across this When I Leave Berlin, which I I really loved it. And if I was doing another sessions band record, I'd want to record that for it, you know. I forget even how I came across it, you know. And the stuff in South America, that started a very particular way, you know. We ended up in Chile unknowingly on the 40th anniversary of the Pinochet government taking control of the country. And so this was a big moment down there, and it was all over the newspapers, and it's very unsettled. You know, people are still trying to figure out what happened, how did it happen, what does it mean. Amazingly enough, we ended in Santiago 2 days before this date, which resonated with when we were there the last time in 1988. We were just across the border, only a few hours away in Mendoza, Argentina, because we couldn't go into Chile at the time. And so I found myself sort of, it was 25 years later, sort of with the same issues going into a concert, you know. It was fascinating. So this was all over the news and in the newspapers. And also it was, of course, the execution of the Chilean songwriter,
Victor Jara.
Victor Jara, you know. So this is a part of what we do. You know, it's been a part of what we do for a long time. Back, you know, back to 88 or whatever. So I need to sort of find a way to, once again, it's kind of for myself. How do I don't want to feel like I'm walking into your house and, you know, playing by the numbers, or it's a particular place. Every place is it's singular. And for me, that is the personalness of rock and roll music for me. Was it always felt, hey, this is speaking to me, not just somebody speaking to sort of, you know, your feet or your ass or your heart or your mind. It's somebody whispering in your ear. And so that personalness is something I always try to communicate. You know, it's just what I like to do. It makes me feel better during the night. It makes me feel like, I'm looking at the people that are there. Mm-hmm. You know, not the people that are going to be there or were there then. I'm looking at the people that are there tonight. Mm-hmm. And so came up with this Victor Jara. Now, I had taken a couple of years of high school Spanish, so it helped me a little bit, and I had some good tutors, and I was able to come up with something that evening, you know. I mean, the Victor Jara story, for the folks out there, that is something you should, it was just shocking, you know. It was an assassination. It would be like if someone had assassinated someone like Bob Dylan. I mean, it was on that level. So it was a shocking event, and it was very close. It wasn't the building we were playing in, but it was nearby.
No.
It was at the stadium, you know. So, you know, it just became a part of the evening, and then you go in the next town, and you go, oh man, if I don't do something in this town, you're gonna be pissed off, because in the last town, you know. So sometimes I said, call up who's the local music writer, call him up, and you know, and I want to get a little picture of who's shaped the musical culture down here, you know, in an area that's close enough to what I do where I might be able to do something with it. And it was very helpful, you know. They sort of turned me towards this song, and I learned a lot about the Chilean performers and Argentinian performers who actually work in your, you know, who cross over what you do a little bit. And then when we got to Brazil, we found that great rock song. Viva.
That's
yeah.
Something. You got it written down.
So that alternative.
Yep.
Yes.
And so I got into his music, you know, and it was just fun. It's fun to do, and if we can pull it off, it's great. You know, it's just because it's the last thing the time people were expecting. You know, you come out and boom, you know, and it was within the purview of my limited language skills, you know. But
is that also what happened in Australia? Went just like Firewood?
Yeah. I always loved the Saints. I love the Saints, and you know, they started. It was a very much punkier band in the first few albums. I'm Stranded and stuff. So I love the Saints, and that song was just something I played it for, I don't know, it's probably 20 years. It was more than that. It's 25 years. But I've always had it around, and I said, well, all right, we're in Australia, man. Let's kick one of these, you know. And then
That one
it's
sounds
just
so much like a Bruce Springsteen song.
you know, we kind of, at the end of the day, by the time we were finished with it, it did, you know. The original record of it is my favorite and fantastic, you know. But it was just an enjoyable song to play, and it had the great riff, the great guitar riff, and there were just places where the band just sat into it so naturally, and then it was It's because it was so musically nice. I put it on the record. You know, so we don't cover too many covers, but it was like it just musically came up in a certain spot, and said, yeah, this is just fun to listen
Like a
to.
perfect song
It's
for
fun to
this
listen
E
to.
Street band.
Yeah,
all
you know.
these different
So,
players, yeah.
but that's a part of, you know, it's all about keeping your ears open, you know, and wherever we go, that's you know, I think if you get tired of doing that, you're too tired, and you should go home, you know. But I like to, you know, any given evening, any specific thing can happen. You know, you bump into somebody out back, you bump into, you don't know, you know. It doesn't happen every night, but it happens relatively often, and we just keep our ears open to what would make the evening distinctive and personal. You know, we're here for you. That was the thing I always got, and that's what we like to go out and deliver. You know, and it just makes it one. There's only tonight. It just makes it. This is for this specific evening, and I go home feeling better. You know, it's this kind of thing like, yeah, we put that extra time in, you earned your keep. So.
In 2014, Bruce released his High Hopes album. Now, revisit this archival conversation with Bruce. High Hopes 10th anniversary with the E Street Radio staff and Bruce Springsteen on Sirius XM.
You mentioned earlier about giving these songs a proper place.
Yeah.
And one of the songs I'm happy that you put on the record is The Wall.
That was to me, that was a very good song that just fell in between the cracks. You know, that was the version we cut with the band of it was just it was just a good song. You know, it was a very unusual. It was Joe Grishecki sent me a lyric, as he occasionally does, which is how we've come to write together. Mm-hmm. It was called The Wall. All his lyrics were different. At that time, I happened to go to Washington, where it was when Bob Dylan was receiving the Kennedy Center honors. So while we were there, I said, hey, Pat, let's go to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. I want to go find my friends that were on there. So we went, and we were there in a day, and I found Walter's name. I'm not sure if I found Bart Haynes. Bart Haynes was the drummer in the Castiles. And, you know, he was our first friend that was killed overseas, and then Walter, you know. And then had the unusual experience that night of sitting a few tables away from Robert McNamara, you know. And it was just, well, there it is, you know, there it is, you know. And so I went home and wrote the song.
Wow. Well, I think that what the audience is going to find is with this song is going to connect with a lot of younger people who have friends or relatives or know somebody that are currently, you know, involved in situations at hand.
Yeah. It's pretty universal, you know. But it was, you know, the things that make you are. It's all the quote unsung heroes of rock and roll business, you know, where it's like Steven, and it's all the parents at the time who didn't, instead of turning it down for some reason, they gave you their dining room and they moved the furniture out and they let you make a loud and initially horrific noise, and day after day after day, and threw the columns into the car and got you to the gig, like Tex and Marion, who were my first, quote, managers, but they were really just a couple who, they didn't have children. They lived in a little half of a shotgun house on Center Street. And, I mean, if I told you that, I mean, I can't believe they let us play. I mean, the house was, it was so tiny, you know, you can't imagine. And
Did Bart live next door?
Bart lived next door. Yeah. Bart Haynes lived next door. So, I mean, people didn't complain. It's incredible. I mean, we made tremendous noise. These very paper-thin walls, and people just let it happen, you know. And so there's all those, but there's guys like the Shoshone brothers. The Shoshone brothers were both very important to me. You know, Ray Shoshone was the first great rock and roll guitarist in our area. He was tall and slick back hair and dressed kind of like what we, you know, very 50s in a dress pants, you know, the nylon socks, pointy-toed shoes. He was very, very large, and he was always kind of hunched over the Stratocaster, which he held very high. But he was just a very fluid guitarist, and he was very kind. You know, he worked in a shoe store, and he would come and sit with me for 30 or 40 minutes in the evening once a week or something, and he would tutor me a little bit on the solos of the day or the techniques of the day. And his brother Walter was very fearsome. You know, he was very wild looking. He was dark skinned. He was quite unconventionally very handsome and long hair down here, and just was someone who we were all scared of, you know. And but he was electric and charismatic, and like I said, he was the first, I would say, the first rock star that I actually sort of was able to come into close contact with, you know. He wasn't of your earth, you know, he was of some other kind, and when you approached him cautiously, and if you said a few words and he said a few back, you went home going, oh man, I talked to Walter. And but it was just the way he carried himself and the way he kind of lived and who he was, and very, very critical to developing young bands, you know. And so these were some big losses, you know, at the time, and this was, I guess, 68 or something. It might have been. I'm trying to think when he went missing in action, you know. But very, very important developmental figures. They made a few records. I'm not sure if they ever made an album. I know they made a single, Motifs. They might have made a few, which you can only get sort of a shadow of what they were about. Live, they were very, very, very exciting in a 60s garage band. They were tremendously, very sexual, very exciting. Just the drummer was incredible. Every musician was incredible. And Vinny ended up playing in Steel Mill with me, little Vinny, the bass player. They were real outlaws at a moment when that whole idea was it was barely there, you know. It was barely there.
The song on the album that I really love and want to talk about is Frankie Fell in Love.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites. That was sort of I have no idea how that was kind of how did that get written? I don't remember. It's very short. The lyric is very, it's kind of funny and gets right to the point on it, you know. Einstein and Shakespeare sitting having a beer. Einstein says, what is it? Oh, I can't remember my lyrics, you know. Shakespeare, it all starts with a kiss. But,
it all starts with a kiss.
We got them. And even if we have them, I won't be able to read them, unfortunately.
That's another reason for bringing
Einstein trying to
people
figure
in.
out the numbers that add up to bliss. That's it.
Yes.
Shakespeare says it all starts with a kiss, and so it was just it was fun. It was fun to write, and I look forward to singing that with Steve Van Zandt.
Yeah.
You know, and it should be a great little rocker in the show, you know. But a lot of fun to write. A lot of fun.
How do you feel about the E Street Band finally getting in a goddamn rock and roll Hall of
Oh,
Fame?
that's very cool. Thank God the heat is off me now. I'm very happy about that. You know, so great. That's gonna be great. Yeah, John called me, and I said, "Hey, Pat, you know, I think the E Street Band." He said, "Really?" I said, "Sure." I said, "Let me check again." I called him back.
Wow.
Yeah, it's gonna, you know.
Are you the only husband and wife in the Hall of Fame?
I don't know, but that's great. Yeah.
What has made the E Street Band such a special band over the years?
You know, I don't know. These are things that they're not quantifiable, you know, because it's based in both personality, it's based in personal history. Rock and roll itself is extra musical or super musical. I'm not sure if that's, in other words, it's about so many other things than just the music, you know? I mean, the music is a cornerstone, but it's about so many other things. Relationships, time, neighborhoods, the shared experience, you know, going a long time and making it work. And so the significance of the band, beyond its great sound, I would say, is that the E Street Band, at the end of the day, when I think of that word and I sit down at the table and I think of what I'm going to do, it makes me dream in CinemaScope. To me, that may be in some ways that along with their incredible live performance and durability, you know, on the road, but that may be the single most important sort of effect that the band has on me. In other words, whenever I think of them, I think of something big, you know, and I think of opening the world I'm addressing. I just kick the sides out because I know we're going to be able to deliver this size and this vision when we go out and play. So without the E Street Band, I would say probably no Land of Hope and Dreams, probably no American Skin, perhaps. Certainly The Rising. These are all things that I don't know if I would sat down and written quite like that for myself as a solo performer or for a nondescript group of musicians. So as time has passed, they've been significant, particularly in the last decade. Once I said, well, I write to live up to the band's abilities and power on stage. That's something that's particularly significant, Even Wrecking Ball, if I go into Wrecking Ball, I think, okay, this is going to be something we're going to deliver. And it just sets me thinking differently. The way you approach the production, the way you approach... So the band has always made me, expanded my line of vision there. And it's something they still do. I still think, okay, what's this going to feel like when we hit the stage? And I'll have forgotten about things that, like this version of High Hopes here, which was something like, something I liked from Javelinas in L.A. We cut it, came out on it was B-side of a B-side or something. And I say, hey, well, what about, let's try that, And then it turns into something a little bit different. I couldn't be happier, I really couldn't be happier. It's certainly what makes a band is a mysterious thing, It's what makes the Rolling Stones the Stones is very fascinating. I had an occasion to play with the Stones in Newark, which was fun. But the real fun was 2 nights before when I went to a little rehearsal studio in New York, and I went in a room, and they were kind of set up in a little small space. It was just kind of the 5 guys, They had little twin reverb amps that they still play through on stage. It is your basic club amp from when you were 16. This is all they're playing through. And there's a microphone and an extra mic for me to sing in. And that's all there was. I mean, you're in the garage. You're in the garage, and they suggested Tumbling Dice. And I stood there, just fascinated, and suddenly, Keith hit the riff and Charlie hit the thing. And there it is. That sound is happening. And there's nothing there. There's a guy with a drum set, a few little amps, and the wonderful mystery of what makes a band is both revealed and forever mystifying. It was just suddenly there's the Rolling Stones. And so I played the song once. He said, that's fantastic. And I went home. And that was it. But that's what I remember. The gig the next night in front of fans was great. But I remember, it's just, you're in the garage for 10 minutes with the greatest garage band of all time. And things were revealed and obscured, I suppose, because it's a mysterious thing. Like I say, it's about the people, the personalities. And it's like John Fogerty. John Fogerty, the incredible body of work with Creedence, And I go, okay, look at Creedence. The guys all played pretty good, But there was something at a certain moment in time that he created that body of work with those guys. They're Creedence Clearwater records, And so it's forever, You're forever linked. I think the time we spent apart was, in some ways, it was an interesting and ended up being very beneficial to us over a long period of time. Because I think when we came back together in the late 90s, there was a sense of it all became about just what it's about, just, okay, I do something with you I can't do with anyone else. You do something with me, it's similar, and we're blessed to be able to do this together. Let's go do that, And for some reason, so many things were put away, and everybody came off stage from that night going, we're lucky to have each other. I'm lucky to have had the E Street Band. There's a lot of things I wouldn't have done, couldn't have done, wouldn't have written, wouldn't have sung without them making me sort of dream the dreams I've dreamt, So, congratulations, guys.
Well, thank you, Bruce.
All right.
Thank you.
Bruce.
My pleasure.
You just heard the exclusive encore conversation with Bruce Springsteen about his album High Hopes on its 10th anniversary. Hear it again anytime in the Sirius XM app. Search High Hopes.